Hi, my name is Lucy Trueman. I'm an organisational psychologist and I'm the founder of Trueman Change. And today's video is longer than my usual video. So this is probably going to be about 25 minutes, half an hour long. And it is specifically about local government reorganisation. So if you follow me online, you'll know that we're doing some research at the moment where we are interviewing people that have been through LGR, and I'm also comparing that with the world of organisational psychology research to see what we can find out to help us prepare for this very significant undertaking, which about half of the councils in the country are going through at the moment. So this is very much about the people side of LGR. There's lots of good insight and information out there available around how to do it safely, how to do it legally, what the process is. But with my psychology background, this research is very much around the impact on people, whether that's staff, whether it's elected members, whether it's communities. This particular session is focused on the impact on staff. It's a long-term piece of research that we're doing over the next 2 years, and I will continue to make some more of these videos as we do each stage of the research. So this is really an introduction to it, what we found out so far, and what sort of things I think you need to be planning for and taking into account if you are one of the councils that's going through LGR at the moment. So, in terms of our research, what have we done so far? We have interviewed over 30 senior officers in local government and a very tiny number of elected members. We've interviewed chief execs, directors, heads of service, and a couple of members. I want to interview more elected members. So if you are going through this and you are an elected member, or you know any elected members that are going through it or have been through it, please point them in my direction for a confidential interview, because I really want the next version of this, the next video I release on the research, to be the elected member perspective. So we explored specific topics around people, so whether that was culture, comms, leadership, resilience, recruitment and retention. What was the impact on staff as they went through this process? And we did a thematic analysis on it, and I've also started to do some work around a literature review and bringing in psychology research from wider sectors, because although LGR is very niche to local government, the concepts of organisations changing and merging and that human experience of that is absolutely not unique to us. So there's lots of good stuff out there that we can learn about. So what did we find? Well, we found that in terms of the impact on people, that it changes at different stages. And this is really powerful information to know if you're at the point where you're starting. I'm recording this in October 2025. So where we are at the moment in terms of the clients we're working with, those that are on the priority programme have submitted their business case, and we've got some who have not submitted yet. They're submitting in November. So most people are in this first column, which is basically working on that business case and waiting for the outcome of it. And the impact on people in that phase is that it obviously feels very uncertain. This is a government-driven top-down agenda, and we don't know what the outcome of it will be. So there's a phenomenal amount of work ongoing to make sure that people get the business cases in. I spoke to somebody that's working on business cases 70, 80 hours a week last week. And so this is a huge amount of work, but we don't know the outcome. And that is impacting a small number of senior officers, because most of your staff won't be involved in that process. And it's obviously impacting elected members massively. And so you've got a small number of people that are getting pulled from pillar to post, and from a political point of view, there will be battles happening, both public and private, where this is a thing that we have to do, and people are frustrated by that. So I'd say lots of uncertainty and a bit chaotic feeling at this stage. Then once you know the outcome of your business case, you'll enter this next stage, which is that prep for vesting day. So what will that feel like? It will be a huge focus on pace and program management and safe and legal. There is going to be a phenomenal amount of work to get done during that time. And it will be an anxious time for your managers and your staff, because the uncertainty that's being carried by a small number of people in your organisation now is going to filter down to the staff at that point. And you'll see power battles and just a massive amount of activity. So the risk there is that behavior will become more amplified. So people will be responding to risk and reward in different ways. People will be motivated by different things. Conflict will start to happen. Which council does this particular process in the best way? All of that is going to amplify behavior. So that's going to be a really tough time. And then at some point during that time, you're then going to have your shadow arrangements in place, which means that you're going to have a shadow cabinet, you're going to have shadow officers being appointed, and that will be a group of people that's job it is to get ready and look to the future, which is in itself a positive thing. However, it's going to be a significant change in dynamics, and there's going to be an impact in terms of leadership, because then you may find yourself in an organisation that has not gone live yet, that has an incumbent chief exec who's not going to be the chief exec of the new organisation, and that obviously can apply to lots of different job titles as well as chief exec. So that's going to be a confusing time as well. And then post-launch is very much when the real work begins. So the people that we interviewed reflected quite strongly on how they wish they'd done more prior to the launch. They wish they'd got more stuff around culture prior to the launch, some of the practical stuff, and they wish that they'd started that service redesign. And we've just started a piece of work for a council that has been through LGR and is now in a place where the dust has settled and they now need to do the work on the culture. So there is a risk that people see vesting day as a deadline, and it is a deadline, but it's also a day one. So in terms of burnout, if you are running yourself into the ground to get this to go live and then realise actually you've still got a lot of work to do on day two, I think that you're at risk of burnout there. So that there needs to be a bit of an element of pace in yourself. And in terms of what are the themes that came out of this research, so what were people telling us? They talked about recruitment and retention. So they've said that, you know, people left. So as they were going through the process of LGR, those of the people in the team that weren't as tolerant of uncertainty, if it was geographically possible for them, may have just got a job in a local unitary where they didn't have to go through that there'll be mixed options in terms of where you are geographically into how much of a risk that is. But some people just didn't want to do it. Some people kind of buried their head in the sands and then were worried about how they would get a job. There's something there about really planning for that and making sure you're having grown-up conversations with people so that you know where your team are. Middle manager pressure. So in reality, the frontline service delivery, the quantity of work is still the same. You know, there's still the same number of bins that need emptying. Where there is significant risk is that middle manager layer. So the people that are most personally impacted by the risk of restructures are also the people that we need to be on it with leading that change and that culture. So and that's often true with any sort of restructure in local government, but it's particularly true around this. So that middle manager pressure we really need to keep an eye on. Political dynamics. Politicians are usually doing this because of an innate drive. They're usually doing this because they feel a sense of calling to become an elected member for their community. That means that the psychological impact can be greater. The sense of identity to them can be greater. So in terms of what they're going through, there's a whole dynamic there that needs managing and supporting. Fear and uncertainty, we know from the world of organisational psychology that we have different levels of tolerance to this. So some people can tolerate it, some people can't, and some people respond to something new happening with worry and fear, and some people respond with positivity and a sense of opportunity. So all of that behaviour is going to be on steroids over the next 2 to 3 years. We got lots of reflections about really seemingly small practical things like, oh, it's been 2 years since we went live and we've still not got the printers working, or my badge doesn't let me in that council's building even though we're supposed to be merged. The practical stuff matters. It matters because it's symbolic and it sends a cultural message. So I'm sorry to add to your workload in that very busy, chaotic phase, but do give some thought to things like that because they do make a big difference. There's lots of power issues going on in terms of where the autonomy is, who can make decisions, how people's sense of identity around, what service areas they own at the moment and whether they will own them going forward. So there will be lots of power issues. And one area where you do see this playing out, and quite a lot of people that I interviewed still talked many years later about the power dynamic between what was county and district, and how people still feel that sense of them and us. So it's really worth thinking about that. Service delivery and performance dipped, I am sorry to tell you. Almost everybody that I've interviewed said it dipped during this time. I'm not surprised because, again, when you look at it from an org site point of view, this is a huge amount to go through. But it is something that if you're in the early stages of it now, it's worth thinking about that and planning for that. Culture clashes, this has actually come through really strongly in private sector research as well. If you don't do the culture work prior to merging with organisations, then you will end up in difficulty because you end up with competing cultures. And finally, the timing of the service redesign. As I said on the last slide, a lot of people wished that they had done that earlier. It's a challenge because it's very, very busy and chaotic. So it's difficult to do that, but that is the reflection. People wish that they'd spent more time and effort on the transformation side of it and the service redesign before going live. So what can the private sector tell us? Because, although it's different terminology and for very different reasons, mergers and acquisitions and changing organisations and rebranding and all that stuff is not new. And it pains me to offer you such big consultancy report findings, but they are interesting in their own right. So according to Bain and Company's 2023 mergers and acquisitions report, 75% of acquirers, so that's people that have acquired another organisation to merge it into their own, report cultural and people challenges. It is super, super common. 70 to 90%, according to Ernst & Young, mergers and acquisitions deals fail or underperform, and lack of cultural integration is cited as being a top reason for that. And McKinsey's global survey on mergers and acquisitions said that when organisations put the effort into getting culture right, they are more than 40% more likely to surpass cost-saving targets and up to 70% more likely to surpass revenue targets. Now, I know those things aren't entirely cut and paste relevant to the public sector, but what they tell us is that human experience of working somewhere, having a sense of identity over it, and then suddenly that being shifted into a new place and a new sense of identity and new colleagues that have come from other organisations does have a huge impact on culture, which can have either a very detrimental impact, or if you do the prep work and get it right, it can have a really positive impact. So this is a human experience, and I think that although we're going to be in this very much fast-paced, legal, get it done, get it over the line, we must not forget that it is a very human experience, and our greatest asset in local government is our people. So we have to make sure that we do right by them. But why psychology? So I've worked in roles around project management, change management, and psychology. Why do I think this is the best tool? So I think that we have a bit of a history of applying project and program management to any change and transformation in the sector. And whilst it brings some real value in terms of it having, a sense of structure and deliverability, what it doesn't bring is that people side. And change management can do some of that. The change curve can be a useful tool, but it's still fairly primitive and still fairly focused on there being a process. And I don't think that's how our minds work in the workplace. So why psychology? Well, if I was to look at an organisational psychology textbook, pretty much LGR would be covered in every chapter, not directly, but the concepts that we look at and research in the world of psychology are very, very relevant to LGR. So this is a very quick, rough and ready mind map, and I'm sure this will grow and change and develop over the next 2 or 3 years as we work with different clients on it. But you know, when you think about how we study how people are able to lead change, what their sense of identity is. These are massive, massive concepts when it comes to LGR, particularly identity, because there's loads of interesting research out there about professional identity. But in particular, in local government, our whole professional identity is tied up with the identity of a place, because that is what we do. Councils are usually named after a place. And on top of that, you may have multi-generational families in your council. So you will have people working for you that's parents worked for you, and you'll have a lot of people working for you that live in the place. So that they are stakeholders and residents of the place. So we are messing with that. You know, we're messing with something that is quite deep. It's also about our ability to cope with uncertainty, and safety is massive. And I will talk a little bit more about psychological safety, but it can be psychological safety within a team, but also your own sense of safety. You know, if we look at things like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's impacting that for people that are worried about being made redundant. There is that personal impact generally, and also our ability to just work as a team when the concept of team is changing. So your team is now going to be different people from different councils who you may not know, that you probably don't know. And then they all interlink. So, you know, our ability to lead change well may well depend on our ability to cope with uncertainty. How we work as a team is impacted by our sense of safety, and our sense of safety impacts our personal resilience. So all of this is a messy map of lots of interesting concepts that all really come to light during LGR. So I'm going to share just a couple of psychology models with you that I think will help you. So the first one, and I use this all the time, it's called self-determination theory. And it's a theory around motivation. It's how motivated we are, and in terms of how we are able to self-motivate and how engaged we are in the workplace. And where this is high, outcomes are better. And what we know impacts it are these three things. So we want a sense of autonomy. We do well at work when we feel like we have some say in how things are done. It's very captain obvious, this, but when you look at it in these three things and you start to really embed them in how you do change, it's very, very powerful. The second one is we want good relationships with people that we work with. And we know this, you know, the sayings are people join a company, but they leave a manager. Every organisation I work in, when I talk about culture, people say, I like my team, but I don't really know what other teams do. It's important to us that we get on with people that we work with. And we have an innate drive to be good at our job. Most of us want to come to work and do a good job. So when all these three needs are satisfied, we are at our best in the workplace. LGR attacks all three. So it is a government-driven, top-down agenda that even chief execs have very limited autonomy about. We are messing with work relationships because we're going to have new relationships with people that we don't know yet. And we are going to be threatened in our sense of competence, because at some point there's going to be conversations about which council does the best way of emptying the bins or processing claims from to do with benefits, or sorting the potholes. Whichever it is, there's going to be debates about which is the best, which is going to threaten our sense of competence. So LGR is impacting all three of these things. Why this is a powerful tool is, once you are aware of that and you know that, you can start to look at how you satisfy all the needs of all three of these things, which will make you a better leader, and it'll make the process feel a lot better for staff. Psychological safety. So I always want to say this is fairly new because it feels new, but also it came out in 1999, so it ain't that new. This is often misunderstood. It's not about everybody getting along and it being nice. It is about the ability to feel safe, to challenge and to suggest new things, and to suggest, we're doing quite a bit of work around what the impact of this is in safety environments at the moment. So it's highly cultural. It will look different in different places. In some places, psychological safety might be swearing at your colleague and having a laugh. In some places, it might not be that at all, but it is very powerful. So we need to figure out how we retain this and foster this and nurture this as we go through this process where we're going to feel like we're being attacked on all fronts. And also resilience. So it's going to be tough on resilience, is this process. So there's a huge amount of uncertainty, which means that you need to prepare yourself for that now. If you're somebody that struggles with uncertainty, you've got a very uncertain 3 years ahead. Constantly grasping for certainty is going to get very tiring very quickly. You need to know your people. So you need to be able to spot in your teams who's struggling, who's not, who's likely to respond well to this, who isn't, who's going to see the risk in the situation, who's going to see the potential opportunities. You need to have a good relationship with people that you work with so that you can tell when they're struggling. And you need to prepare your managers for this timeline, because when you lay that timeline out in those different stages and you explain the different challenges from a people perspective on those different changes, you're allowing your managers to prepare. You know, I hear people say a lot, it's not a marathon, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. But I also hear people say it's a triathlon because there's all these different parts to it. I think both of those statements are true, but I think there's a lot to be said for preparing managers. You're going to be dealing with a lot. Let's get ready for it. I think you need to work on your culture pretty quickly, because what the research is telling us is that culture is what will make or break this, and you're going to be very focused on everything but culture. So I think starting to think about that as early as you can will pay dividends, and particularly once you know the outcome of the business cases, doing some sort of cultural assessment for your own council and your councils that you're going to end up working much more closely with and becoming one with. That's what you really do need. You need to be ready for that work and understand it. Back to the triangle, we need to be identifying where people have autonomy and influence. It would be very challenging to go through this if you feel like you have no autonomy. And I'm actually doing a session tomorrow with a council where we are going to identify where do we have autonomy, because we don't have in the top-down driven approach, but that's only that this has to happen. Everything else about it, we have a lot of autonomy and influence over. So really starting to identify that so people can get into a proactive space rather than a reacting space will really help people. And skill your leaders up on conflict now, because the research that I did, the interviews I've had, people are talking about silly things that happened 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Do you remember when they said we couldn't use their building? Do you remember when they said that we couldn't do this? It sticks. So make sure your leaders are in a good place to handle conflict and disagreement and healthy co-production, so that we're not all going live with history of things that were said during that very difficult stage. So how do you integrate this into your process? Because I'm sure you've got a process, I'm sure you've got a program, and you need that. You absolutely need that, because there's a hell of a lot of work to get done. But how do you integrate some of this activity to make sure that you're not one of these organisations that's going to be going live with a lot of regrets? So if we take it stage by stage, what you need to be doing while you're waiting for your business case results is starting to have sessions and support with your managers and your leaders around resilience, around leading change, around autonomy. And I think you need to be doing some one-to-one coaching with people now, so that you're getting a sense of where do people want to be, what kind of career do people want, do they want to carry on doing similar work to what they're doing now. Can you give them exposure to new types of work to put them in a better position for getting jobs in the future? Or are they just, you know what, now's my time to go, which is fine. Be doing some of that one-to-one work with people now. And also your workforce strategy, you want a strategy in place that's got a snapshot of what's your current culture like, where are the risks, where's the comms, where's the skill gaps, you know, what is our strategy for getting through this next 3-year period. Once you know the outcome of your business cases, then I think you continue doing those sessions and that coaching with your managers, but you shift focus a little bit. So what you want to be looking at here is delivery. You know, how do they operate in that fast-paced environment? How do they deal with conflict, and how are they going to respond to risk and reward? Because remember, the conflict is going to happen in this phase. So getting them ready for that and bringing some of that to the front so that they can air it out in a safe space, I think is really powerful. Also, once you know the outcome of your business cases, then doing a comm strategy is really important. So who do you need to communicate with? How are you going to do that? What are your key messages? How do you keep everybody on track from now to go live? And you might want to start doing some targeted interventions. So there may be some areas of your council that you're worried about, that culturally is going to struggle, that's going to struggle for other reasons. You might want to be putting some special attention on those areas. Once your shadow arrangements start to kick in, what I'd then be doing is focusing those sessions on leading new teams and culture. And this is when your culture work really, really needs to kick off. So I think you'll have done some of the mapping as part of your workforce strategy earlier on, but really starting to consciously lead culture at this stage is really, really important. So doing a full mapping exercise across all of the councils that are involved in that particular blueprint is really crucial at this stage. And again, you'll be doing your branded launch, you will be making sure that your values and your vision is right, and also you may still be doing some targeted interventions on parts of the councils that are struggling, maybe starting to bring them together and starting to do some co-production on new ways of working. And then finally, it's your cultural embedding stuff afterwards and your service transformation. And again, you know, this is when the real change and transformation work does start. So you need to pace yourself through this process. In terms of general tips and advice, this is a great tip, not just for LGR, but for any sort of change and transformation. Always engage much earlier than you think you need to. And I would add to that, always engage much more than you think you need to. It is so powerful when people feel like they're engaged and they understand what's going on, even during uncertainty. It is so powerful. So start working with your managers, particularly now, building that skill set so that they can go into the next stage really well equipped to lead your staff. Train your managers and leaders on how to handle change and the emotional impact. There is going to be a lot of emotions over the next 3 years, and you need middle managers and leaders in place that can read that understand that, and that are prepared for that, and they can read and understand it in themselves. So I'd be doing that work now, because when you get into the safe and legal pacey bit, it will feel like too much of a luxury. So do the prep work now to get them in a good place so that when they go into that bit in the middle, they'll be in a stronger position. Start building your approach to internal and external comms now, which means building your channels and your collateral and your messages so that as soon as you've got your results of your business case, you've got a machine ready to go. Comms and engagement will really matter during this time. You need to mentally prepare for this journey. So the change curve that we all know and love is going to be staggered. So by the time you as senior leaders are coming out of this and almost bored of LGR, your staff will be right at the bottom of the curve. So you need to mentally prepare for the longevity of it. If I was giving you advice about a change and transformation program in your council right now, my advice would be do it as quickly as possible, because the longer it drags on, the more challenging it is. That is an option with LGR. It's going to drag on. And connected to that, take care of yourselves, because this is a challenge to your resilience. So you want to make sure that your middle to senior manager group has a safe space, they are supportive of each other, that they are aware of their own limitations. Risk of burnout is going to be really high, risk of stress is going to be really high. So preparing for that and being conscious and proactive about those things will really pay you dividends. And in terms of if you feel that we need some help, we can help with doing leadership workshops. We can help with bringing order to the chaos and helping you with your comms. Anything that we've talked about really is our cup of tea. And we're working with quite a few people as change partners, which means we partner up with you through this journey. And then we can read your organisation and say, right, now's the time to do your workforce strategy. Let us help you with that. Now's the time to do some cultural work. Let us help you with that. Here is where you need an intervention. So reach out if you feel overwhelmed by this, if you're listening to this and thinking, oh my God, this is a huge amount of change, which I know you already know, but it would be very easy to get sucked into the kind of program delivery of it and neglect this people side. So if you do need help with that, then please do give me a shout. But also please do take part in the research. So on the next slide, you've got my contact details. We're going to be running fairly regular events, which will be free online events where we will share with you the outcomes of the research at that point in time. We're particularly interested in elected members, so we've not interviewed enough elected members. So if it's anybody listening who is an elected member or who knows someone that's been through it, I would love to interview them. It's completely confidential, but I think that's a bit of a gap in our research at the moment. And yeah, if you'd like to keep in touch, then reach out to me. We're going to continue this research over the next 2 or 3 years. We're supporting quite a few councils with the process already, so we're sharing the research with them, but we're happy to share it with anyone who's going through the process and wants some support. So please do give me a shout, and I hope to see you at the next recording in a few months' time, which will hopefully all be about elected members.